Welcome to Tuesday Truth. I'm Andrew, your host, and today we're diving into the most powerful moments from this week's conversation with this week's amazing, inspiring guest. These are clips, but they're also insights that'll change how you see your own journey. So let's get right into it.
And when you're building something big where you think that this is going to be a big thing, it's going to change people's lives. And, even, Sales Command is there to also impact businesses and grow businesses. And for me, it's impacting other women's lives to believe that they can actually make an impact and do what we do and all that sort of stuff. So then we were going through a really tough time. And I said to Adam, do you think it's time? And again, it was a financial thing. It was my scared of finances because I had my finances together, my whole life. And this is one thing that I really need to break through was the finances part, because my whole life I had been working so hard to financially be independent. So I didn't have to worry about anyone. No one else had the money for me, right? I had to be that person. And so when it came to building a business, all of a sudden it was like going into debt, and I've never been into debt. So that was one thing that I just never wanted to get into, but it's good debt, right? So the mindset that I had to sort of work on was, well, we're building something big. It's going to take time. It's not going to be overnight. We're going to have to go into a bit of debt using credit cards and all that sort of stuff. So we applied for credit cards and, we started to sort of go through that journey. And I started to get really uncomfortable at the start of this year going, I don't know if I can do this. Like, Adam, maybe you need to go back to corporate. Maybe you're going to have to go back. And then he's like, Ev, you don't understand. This business could be something big. You got to think bigger. You got to think, and because I'm not an entrepreneur, I've never done this before. It's like taking risks. It really is about taking risks. I prayed to my mum. I was like, Mum, give us a sign, please. If there's anything that, and I kept on hearing meditation, money will come, money will come, money will come. Anyways, I prayed to her one night, and the next day I received money into my account randomly, right? And it was money that I never even thought I would get, because it was like a childcare subsidy thing that they stuffed up and then they fixed or something like that. And then I realized that I had a message that I hadn't ever received in my MyGov saying that the subsidy was wrong, calculated wrong, and the money was sent to my account. But for me, that was a sign. That was my first sign going, okay, Mum, you've told me, let's just keep going. Money will come. Money will just come. And that's not a problem. And so then the next part that we got into another really difficult situation where we had a co-founder, but then he stuffed us up, and then we went into this, he took money from us because we had clients. Anyways, this is another story in itself. Again, I was like, what is this trying to tell us? And I'm like, Mum, are we doing the right thing? Are we doing it? And so another thing that happened where my brother and I were talking about childhood and the purpose behind everything that we're doing. And I said, gosh, it's really, really hard. It really is hard to think about all the sacrifices that we're making. And then I think about the sacrifice that my mum made. She had to go backwards to go forwards. And, I'm like, that's what it feels like I'm doing right now. As a 40-year-old, I'm doing it. When she was 40, it's like we're going backwards, we're giving everything away. And I came up with something called Sandifer syndrome. And it was something that wasn't well known, but it was in the US, and I found some stuff on Sandifer syndrome, but all the symptoms was what she had. And I was like, Adam, she must have this Sandifer syndrome thing, and it is like a reflux GERD thing, but it comes with all these neurological kind of things that happen, and so she must have that. But every single time she would have it every 3 weeks, it was scary. It was scary because she would just go limp, and when she'd vomit, it was a lot. So dehydration was one thing, and we actually called the ambulance 2 or 3 times, because we were like, she's dehydrated, she was going limp and she wasn't responsive half the time, so it was just a really odd thing to go through. And when eventually we got to the pediatrician, maybe 3 months later, she then said, yeah, she's got Sandifer syndrome. And it is scary. It is one of those things that, it's good that we found out, because some of it goes really unseen, because of the moments that when it does happen, pediatricians will always ask for a video, like send us a video or whatever, and it happens so quickly you don't have time to, you know, take it out. But for us, it was lucky that when she did have it for the very first time, a nurse saw it, right? So it was seen. But another thing that we had to deal with as well, and while we ended up in hospital for a week, was because she was losing a lot of weight. And that wasn't normal because she was throwing up every 3 weeks and all that sort of stuff. And because of her reflux, she wasn't eating enough. And we as parents were scared to feed her because every single time we'd feed her, it's like, is it going to happen again? So there was a lot of anxiety that we dealt with as newly parents. And then it stopped when she was 14 months old. She had a medication. We had to constantly take her on medication, constantly have her at a pediatrician to get her checked to make sure that her weight was okay and all that sort of stuff. And then at 14 months, it stopped because the pediatrician said it will stop eventually. Like, you know, sometimes it goes until they're 2 years old, right? Yeah. So at 14 months, it stopped. I remember thinking that bit by bit, it was getting a little bit better and better and better and better. 14 months, it stopped. Then the month after that, then she ended up with some other random thing that ended us in hospital again, septic arthritis. So she was complaining about her shoulder. We were in Sydney visiting my brother, and she was complaining about her shoulder, being really fussy. Everything hurt. So as soon as we got home, took her to the doctor. The doctor was like, straight to the emergency. And we went to the emergency. We were there overnight, and they were like, you know, what she has is septic arthritis. We have to operate on her. We have to have surgery. And that was the day that we realized that after going back and forth from hospital, all these tests and all that sort of stuff, this was another thing that I had to call and it had ended, right? So then it's like a new thing. I had to call my manager and tell her, we're at the hospital again. And I just felt like, oh my God, for like this to happen again, it's like, will they think I'm lying? Will they think you start to question all these things? Like, and I was getting treated obviously differently because I was barely around and I had to work from home, and everyone was wanting to get back. COVID had finished and all that sort of stuff. Everyone wanted to get back into the office. And I'm always giving these excuses that because she had Sandifer syndrome, I wanted to be there. I wanted to be home. And so I
shouldn't have to feel guilty.
Yeah, I kept pushing back, going, I don't want to go into the office. Like, she's got this thing. And I don't know if like my mother-in-law is going to be able to deal with it. What happens if she goes limp? Like all these things that, you know, I wanted to just be there for her. And then this happened. And again, I pushed back going into the office. So all this pushing back of wanting to be just there for her versus the paycheck. Because at the end of the day, I wasn't happy with the work that I was doing anyway. It was just a paycheck. I had to really think about that. I was like, am I even really making a difference? Am I really making an impact with what I'm doing in my corporate job? Do I really care for it? And again, it comes to asking yourself these questions like, what am I doing this again for? A paycheck. Okay. Yeah. The money's good. But does it equal happiness, and does it equal like the sacrifice that I'm having with my daughter that's going through a really tough time, and all I'm thinking about is showing up for work?
What was those early years before you started paying the bills at 14, 15 years old? You're living a life in Australia, you're in school. What did school look like for you after losing your mother? Your dad obviously started to be present in a different way.
Yeah. Good question. I think school for me, when my mum passed away, was I actually moved schools when my stepmom came into play. So when my mum passed away, I was in one school, right? And I was in grade, I would say 1 or 2, when I then moved to a different school. But my stepmom was already in the picture. So it was almost like a clean slate. I went from one school to another, and all of a sudden no one knew me at this new school, and I had a stepmom. So I actually went straight away into, this is my mum, this is my normal family. We have a normal family, right? Yeah. And so that then led to obviously not being authentic in my story, right? Because I never got told, and that's where I think Speak to Be Seen comes into as well. So that comes my purpose, because I had to wear a mask. Yeah, so this is how it all sort of comes together. Yeah. I had to wear a mask for a very long time, and my stepmom was jealous of me speaking about my mum, and she would always say, don't cry. There's no point crying. Crying won't bring her back. And I'll remember going to the cemetery, And my whole family would go to the cemetery, but because I was the youngest one, she would pull me away. And she'd be like, come over here, have a look at this and have a look at that. And, pulling me away from my own family, So there was that disconnect. She was disconnecting me from my own family. So growing up, I felt disconnected from everyone. Disconnected from my own family, disconnected from my mum, my own mum. I had this stepmom who was telling me how I should feel, how I should think, how I should act, that I shouldn't even spend time with my dad because he's so tired, your dad's so tired, don't bother him, So yeah. That's how I grew up with a stepmom that really did a lot of damage in a way that made me someone else that I wasn't. And when she left when I was 12, it was a hard pill to swallow because I obviously then loved her. I then became, that was my go-to person.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I felt lonely, disconnected, because that one person I had that whole time that told me to just be with her kind of thing I had to then start to connect with my sister, with my brother, which was hard because they were doing their own thing as well. So my friends became my family. So then I started to go out with my friends and, at 12 when she left, I obviously started to, head out with my friends. So at 14 years old, I was drinking, partying, Friday night, with my friends and, got up to a lot of stuff. At that point in time, my dad would drop me off at my friend's house and say, don't go out, make sure you don't, do this. And he obviously knew what I was up to, but he couldn't control it because he was too busy working. And so I became a party animal, went into partying every Friday night, binge drinking, relationships after relationships, and my friends became my family.
You were filling that void, weren't you? That gap that was missing, that invisible gap that you weren't even probably conscious or aware of.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. So coming from that teen period then, where did life take you into early adulthood?
Yeah, and love that question as well, because then that leads into, going into that societal norm, even though I was, partying, drinking, all that sort of stuff, I still wanted to please my dad at some point, right? My dad was like, you got to buy a house and get married and have kids and, do all the things that we're meant to do in society. And he pushed me to buy a house, buy a house, I wish I did that, and look at us where we're at, and I worked so hard, and you now, build that legacy, right? But for them, legacy meant buying a house.
Yeah.
And so I was with someone for 7 years on and off. I didn't love him, but I felt safe with him. And I didn't realize this, right? You don't realize that until you go through the motions and all that sort of stuff. And so when I was with him, he wanted to buy a house and, wanted to do all the right things. I was 23 at that point, or 24. And mind you, I come from, that party, loved traveling. I had been traveling, since I was 14 years old, on and off, because I was working and saving and going and traveling, living the life. And then when I was 23, we decided to buy a house and to settle down.
What you just witnessed is only a snippet of our amazing conversation this week. This is what Leading Our Own Way is all about. Real stories, real transformation. If you're watching this before Wednesday, part 1 dropped yesterday and part 2 releases tomorrow. But if you're already here after Wednesday, all parts are available now. Head to YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts and every other major platform and look for the numbers on the bottom left-hand corner of the episode's covers to start with part 1. Trust me, you don't want to miss this incredible journey.